Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Rich Scheben is with us, offgridmontana.com. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Oh, thank you, Vincent Finelli. How have you been?
Well, I have been just fine. How have you been?
I've been good. Yeah, I've,
you want to
off grid.
Give us some highlights?
Certain responsibilities like, getting firewood in, getting meat, getting fish, preserving it, taking care of the animals, make sure they have winter feed, winter bedding, finalizing your harvest in the garden. There's, certain responsibilities with this lifestyle. It's all fun, even though it might be under the category of chores. I look at it as a lifestyle, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Vince?
Well, I totally agree. And, I was thinking about hay when you mentioned hay. Have you noticed that the price of hay has gone up in Montana, or has it been holding?
It's going up pretty much everywhere. We had a pretty good drought this summer, and for me, I have more of a hobby farm scenario than you and a lot of so-called quote-unquote ranchers. So I have to get hay by the small square bales, the old-fashioned square bales, and it's getting tougher and tougher to do because they either have the big squares or maybe big rectangles, or the 1 ton or half-ton rounds. And I can't use that for the little goat herd that I have. So, it's getting tougher to find those small squares, and it's more costly for the farmer or the rancher to produce them. So, obviously, supply and demand, prices go up. Vince?
Yeah, and you know what happened? Years ago, you would find young people who would have some time off in the summer, and that's when the hay would be harvested. So the farmer would be out there on a tractor with a sickle bar mower cutting the hay, and then someone would either ted or rake the hay, depending on the conditions of the sun and the temperature and the humidity. And then to bale the hay, you have three choices. One is a large square bale, which we don't use, really large. Then there's the round bale, the larger round bales, which are 4x4, 4x5, 5x6, 6x6. And then there are the smaller square bales, which are the rectangular, bales that you were talking about, the 50-pounders on average. And the problem with the small square bales, or the rectangular ones, is that you do the steps of cutting and raking and maybe tedding. Tedding is, think of it like it's kind of a rake, but it doesn't rake into a pile. What it does is it grabs the hay and it randomizes it. It scatters it. Kind of like if you had an egg beater and you cut off the end and you kind of twirled it and it flung the hay that it would come in contact with in a 360-degree horizontal pattern. The idea is to have more surface area for the sun to dry it out more quickly. Well, with those smaller square bales, you've got the hay baler, and then out of the hay baler come the bales. They just drop on the ground. And then someone's got to pick them up at 50 pounds apiece and put them in a wagon. Then once you get them in a wagon, you've got to get them into a barn. You just have to stack them in the barn. Then when you go to sell them, you got to get them out of the barn and stack them on a truck. So there's a lot more labor, and it's harder to pick up those kinds of bales by hand than by just grabbing a round bale with a front-end loader. So there's a lot more labor involved in the small square bales. But that's not really where the problem is. The problem is who are you going to get to do the labor, because the young people today are more interested in looking down on their phones than they are in picking up bales of hay and earning money. That's the problem. It's too hard. And anyone who has handled square bales in the field, picked them up, put them on a wagon, stacked them in a barn, will tell you that it is work. Absolute work. It's kind of like firewood. You know, it takes a lot of strength to handle them. Now, of course, it's probably great exercise, really, really good exercise, because it uses all your muscles. You've got to keep up with the hay wagon that's being pulled by a tractor in front of you. Now, there are some saving measures, labor-saving measures, and I wanted to actually buy this. And we debated in our family about this. There was a hay baler, a square baler for sale. This is really cool. I don't know if you've ever seen one, Rich. I've never seen one before. But a farmer who had been a farmer for 50 years was going out of business. And he was selling everything, including this hay baler. Now, attached to the back of the hay baler, where the bale would come out and land on the ground, it would land on this attached device called an accumulator. And this accumulator would grab the first bale, grab the second bale, and on a flat surface, and grab the third bale, and then push it off to the side of this little wagon. Then it would grab three more. So it would create an array of bales that were 4 bales by 4 bales. And then they would be in a flat package. Think of it like a palletized set of bales of hay, except way bigger than a pallet. And then at the right time, it would kick it off into the field. So you'd still have this matrix of bales of hay. And then you come along with the front end loader with this hay grabber thing, and you just align it, and it grabs all of those bales at the same time, all of them. And then you just drive over to your barn and stack them. So you don't have to pick them up. You don't have to pick them up at all until you want to get them out of your barn. If you want to get one out, you get one out. But if you want to get out the whole array of them, you get, a bunch of them all at once with this hay grabber thing. And I don't know what it's sold for, but I was really interested in it. But I was the only one. No one else in our family wanted to buy this equipment because very few people are using square bales anymore. So that's the story about square bales. That's why you don't see them as much, and that's why they're so darn expensive, because they are really labor intensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you got to do what you got to do in the meantime.
Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen that accumulator device?
I think I have. I'm more at the recipient end of the product than I am the manufacturing end of it. So I don't pay attention to that stuff as much, I
got to tell you that I'll bet you this array of implements, the hay baler and the accumulator and the grabber device to grab it all, I'll bet it's up to $20,000, at least $20,000 for that equipment, which is a pretty significant investment for a little bales of hay.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Vince, I got to go off tangent here for a second. Is your volume up all the way? Because on the first break, I'm gonna call in again, and I don't know if it's my phone or yours, but I want to see because I could barely hear you for some reason.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll ask. Okay, we got it. Rich, Nathan is adjusting it, and I'm looking at another screen that I have here in the studio, which is the statistics screen of the connection, and I'm literally seeing 2 seconds of delay between me and you and me. So what that really means is that that's why we have this pause, and I'm going to see if I can fix that during the break, which is coming up in just a few minutes. So, Rich, what would you like to talk about today?
Well, there's a billion things to talk about, but I just want to remind the American voters of a quote that's not that old, and I'll start with the quote immediately. We are sending a clear message. Just because your child gets across the border, that doesn't mean that your child gets to stay, unquote. This is a quote from Hillary Clinton. Everything that's happening right now is not for the benefit of the American people, of the little guy, of the bottom 93% of income earners. Everything that is happening today is to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people by groups. Everything that's happening is subsets under that. Like, under distractions, you can put disruptions. Basically, the people in power, you know, people call them liberal. They're not liberal. People say, oh, I voted Democrat all my life, even though all the criteria has changed. Like this quote I just mentioned from Hillary Clinton. It has nothing to do with giving equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, prosperity, inclusiveness, democracy, and humanity to the little people. There's nothing to do with it. It's all about, if you look at where the big checks are coming, all the donations, okay, from the Soroses, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Gates, the Buffetts, the Zuckers and the Zuckerbergs and the Bezos, you know, all these so-called white males who are bashing white males, but it has nothing to do about the super wealthy. It's all about the poor / middle class white male heterosexual with a Christian name. It's all about getting every shade of skin pigmentation against one another. It's all about basically creating clashes of genders, one against the other. Sex, sexual orientation, religion, manufactured perception of ideology. We need to talk about this for a moment after the break, Vince, because it's turning into it's gone beyond Twilight Zone episode out in the political world. Vince?
Rich Sheben's with us. Nathan, I'm going to reconnect, and it's going to take me about 3 minutes. We'll be right back. Okay. You know, sometimes, class, we have to reset the router here because we have the poorest telecommunications company in the galaxy. That would be CenturyLink. And you can even look up CenturyLink customer service and see how it's rated. It is rated very, very poorly. So it's not like they're just picking on us. They pick on everybody. They are an equal opportunity company. They'll take advantage of all their customers, and they keep raising the rates. They're just like everybody else. Some people would say they're no worse than everybody else, but I think they are. Rich Sheben's with us. Rich, you want to talk about Maxine Waters for a minute?
Sure.
Okay. So Infowars.com has an article, and it says, unhinged, Congresswoman spews more incendiary rhetoric. This is September 17th, 2018, Paul Joseph Watson. The next lines say, Congresswoman Maxine Waters is under fire for spouting more incendiary rhetoric after she gave a speech in which she calls for the leftists and Democrats to, quote, knock off, end quote, President Trump. Then she goes on, and here's what she said. Quote, there are those who say, what if we get rid of him? Then we've got that vice president, and he'll be worse. I say, knock off the first one, then go after the second one, end quote, said Waters. Where These comments were made during an event in Washington, D.C. on Friday night where Maxine Waters received a diversity award.
Oh.
Now, let me read this, if I may. Okay. So I looked up the phrase, knock off. And here's the definitions, according to the Internet. It's an intransitive verb. And here are the definitions. The first definition. To do hurriedly or routinely knock off one painting after another. That means bang them out. That means process them very quickly. Definition number 2, discontinue or stop. Knocked off work at 5, meaning we quit work, ended the workday at 5 o'clock. Definition number 3, deduct. Knocked off a little to make the price more attractive. So you get the haircut, one side is different lengths from the other, and you turn to your barber and you say, can you knock off a little since, my head's lopsided, with my haircut like this? That would be definition number 3. Definition number 4, kill. Let me say it a different way. Kill. Knocked off 2 men on mercenary grounds. Okay, so the term knockoff can mean kill. Now, in the American language, the English language as we use it in America, there are several definitions of the same word. So or several words that can be used to express the same thing. So when I was growing up, if something was really interesting, had some wow factor, it used to be back in the 50s, that's really hot. Well, hot could mean it's really excessively warm. Or that really hot thing that was interesting and amusing and different could be cool also. So it could be hot, cool, interesting. Lots of words can be used to mean the same thing. But I think that the definition that Maxine Waters meant was to kill. And I believe she's looking for someone to kill President Trump. Now, would you say that is an action of a traitor? Oh, absolutely. In my world. So why has she not been counseled, in a small room with iron bars? Why? Another definition is overcome or defeat. Knocked off each other, or to rob. Knocked off is to rob. Or knocked off is to make a copy. So those are some of the definitions of knockoff, but I think she means K-I-L-L. We'll be right back. OffGridMontana.com with Rich Scheben. Rich, what's on your mind?
Well, let me comment on what you just said there, Vince.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson did a recent piece on this, basically saying, are Democrats advocating domestic terrorism? And they're getting crazier by the hour. You have Democrat, socialist, far-left groups saying, I'm coming with a gun, and I expect to get numerous blood-stained mega hats as trophies. We have Democrats is an older actress in her 90s who basically came out and says, where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him? Basically confirming that she advocates assassinating the president. Wyoming GOP office gets torched 2 days after it just opened, not to mention all the self-righteous tunnel vision that Maxine Waters is still a proponent of to incite her followers to confront Trump supporters and even mentioning violence on occasion, or at least implying it. So, there's so much. People need to understand that the reason why President Trump got elected is because the people spoke up, okay? Nobody agrees with everything anybody does. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's an imperfect sinner, and that's just the way it is. President Trump is a symptom of the people waking up, okay, because they wanted a shake-up. Because the Democrats are no longer representing the people, especially the little people. Their job is to distract, dumb down, and divide us by race, gender, sex, religion, ideology. Even they're going after generation. And the mainstream media, the lawyers, the judges, the politicians, and the bankers are all intermediaries or liaisons in order to manufacture this perception, pity, guilt, and ideology, and most of all sway public opinion and hold on to the narratives. People need to understand there's only 5 or 6 companies, that includes production companies and publishing companies, that is doing everything in their power to make sure information, and especially truth, doesn't get out. And this is why I try to mention standing for principle. I have 3 criteria I think is so important. The first one is that we all need to have the same rules, laws, and accountability on American soil, and we don't. And the powers that be are doing everything possible in order to make sure that we are divided as part of the divide and conquer strategy. Second of all is truth. I mean, if everything is going to be, especially from the left, and it's not just the left, that's why there's Republicans called rhinos and neocons, because they're also bought and paid for. They probably have some type of criminal background in their past. It could be pedophilia, it could be money laundering, who knows? But they've been bought and paid for by the powers that be. So they need to hold on to the narrative, the memes, themes, talking points, and the microphone, and they don't give any ideas and solutions to better the little people, to make them control their own destiny, to keep freedom, liberty, and justice, and the pursuit of happiness. They don't give any of these ideas. All they do is try to destroy what the people want to create for themselves. The people just want to be left alone. Now, all this talk about, when I started this quote regarding immigration with Hillary Clinton, it's pretty obvious that the powers that be do not want us to have any memory of anything. This is why they're constantly changing. And when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job, it has metastasized into total degradation of the whole country. We have no burden of proof. It all depends on what group you're in. We have no due process anymore. Citizen rights, mass surveillance, censorship, secret wars, secret societies, secret courts, pedophilia is running rampant. There's no accountability for any of these elite groups, especially if they're NGOs. Look at all the money, folks, that comes from the left. It's not coming from the little people. It's coming from the gazillionaires who have an addiction to power, money, and control. Now, we have an important election coming up, and you can certainly vote for the globalist regime, but I guarantee you one thing. Freedom, liberty, justice, pursuit of happiness will all be gone. Just so you know, will either be run by either Sharia law or Chinese rule. Either way, privacy, surveillance, censorship, truth. If you don't get truth, why listen to this show? Why read? Well, the powers that be on the left are burning books. They're changing definitions of common American words. They're making almost every word a politically correct buzzword in order to use as a weaponized tool to divide the American people. So you got to ask yourself, is it really liberal? Is it liberal to censor books and words? Is it liberal to be a grown man, identify as a girl, and sexually molest young girls? Is it liberal to call people Nazis, sexual violent rapists, and eliminating the right to think, speak, or communicate? Having science bought and paid for. Look at the DOJ, the FBI, the NSA. I mean, even Lisa Page or I think that's her name, Strachan Page, I think that's it. Anyway, she just recently came out and said that they didn't even have Russian collusion when Mueller started this whole surveillance search on Trump. They didn't even have it. They're just trying to obstruct and buy time. Same thing with the Kavanaugh hearing. They want to buy time to get past the midterms. Rule of law means absolutely nothing. I mean, is it liberal to have 96% of Monsanto shareholders vote to not disclose what's in GMO ingredients? Is it liberal when a Democrat congressman says that Kellyanne Conway looks familiar on her knees? You know, we got to stop the fact that liberals, so you call yourself a liberal, and basically you're excused from rules, laws, and accountability, or especially lowering the bars of standards. Do you remember when Joy Behar called Bill Clinton rape victims tramps? I don't see Kavanaugh calling this lady tramps. I mean, we've literally moved into a Twilight Zone episode. And this, what's her name, Blasey? I can't remember, but it turned out, I remember reading an article just the other day where her parents went through a foreclosure with Kavanaugh's mom being the judge. So this looks more like mega revenge than trying to make America great. I mean, nothing is making sense. They're changing the definition of fascism. They're eliminating free speech. They're normalizing pedophilia. Even the New York Times were on record of saying it's not a crime, and they were defending NAMBLA, I think the North American Man-Boy Love Association. I mean, what is it liberal to redefine marriage? You know, same-sex, marrying children, marrying pets, marrying farm animals, trees, computers, and other inanimate objects? And de Blasio saying there's 51 genders? Really? I mean, we've gotten to the point that absolutely nothing matters. And if you read the Communist Manifesto, if you read Cloward and Piven, if you read all these books that show the Frankfurt School, you can see that Marx and Alinsky force-fed a regimen to the globalists that they are following to the letter. And we're so drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness, we've allowed the elite to set the stage for government interventions, confiscation, redistribution of wealth to the elite using tools like group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status. Agenda 21, the word sustainable city, the word humanitarian. This all leads to a loss of individual rights. Now, Trump said he wanted to give America back to the people. Now, if the Republic is so corrupt, I would rather have a plan B of going towards a Switzerland style where the Congress and President has very little power because they're not representing the little people. Everybody is bought and paid for. And this is why I talk about Vince, QE for the people. Now, I've said this on the air a few times. If it's okay with you, I wouldn't mind rehashing it again because we've gotten to the point where I see so much despair, so much drug use, so many people giving up, suicides going through the roof. I just think that the little people need to step up. We can't be afraid of being politically correct and losing our job, losing our pension. Anybody who knows my background, that's exactly what happened to me because I stood for principle. And if we don't, we will lose America. And we certainly owe it to the little people, to the people who fought for our freedom, to the people who made a difference to make America free, to the people who, the 17-year-old that stormed the beaches of Normandy and lied about their age and died on the beach. They showed up as a boy and they died as a man. I think we owe those people. We even owe the Vietnam vets, all the names that they got called. This was a draft war. The people who did enlisted because they thought or knew just out of the laws of probability and math that they were going to get drafted. And this was a false flag war, the Bay of Tonkin. Look it up. So now we have 60,000 people who have died roughly in the Vietnam War. And what do they get out of it? What do we get out of it? What does anybody get out of it? All we did is enrich the bankers and the hierarchy of the military-industrial complex. The little people have to speak up and not care what is said. But we need to use common sense and logic. And Vince, if it's okay with you, I'd like to go over the QE for the people again after the break.
Sounds great. Rich Sheaven off. Oh, did we lose Rich Sheaven? I don't think so.
I'm still here.
Yeah, please continue.
Okay, you bet. Well, again, the reason why I mentioned that Hillary Clinton quote about immigration, about we need to send a clear message when your child goes across the border doesn't mean your child gets to stay. This is all about the votes, and they just hope that the American people are useful idiots, like they call you, like Zuckerberg calls his people on Facebook effing dummies, like Democrat the guy who wrote the I can't think of his name right now. Guy who wrote the Obamacare. He said that American people are stupid. Jonathan Gruber. Okay, if we remember what these people say, their implications and their agenda is very obvious. Now, I don't know anybody who's anti-immigration. People don't care what skin pigmentation they have or sexual orientation or religion or gender. They don't care. The fact is that the American people are broke. Why are they saying now the left is that illegal alien term is now hate speech? It's the biggest bunch of crap in the whole world. The American people are frickin' broke. 80% are living paycheck by paycheck. Over 4,300 Americans get killed by illegal alien criminals every year. Who does it affect? The poor and the middle class, the people who can't afford security guards, who can't afford to live behind a guarded gate. This is all about fomenting race wars and hate. Over 900,000 convicted illegal felons are roaming our streets. We have the increased car insurance, public education, and health care because of the cost shifting for people who don't have to pay. We have robotics, automation, artificial intelligence taking millions of American jobs. This is not going to just put us in a recession, which you're in because all the books are cooked. This is probably going to put us in the worst depression ever. Even the CEO, the Congressional Budget Office, says 1 in 5 illegal aliens will go on food stamps if Congress approves DACA amnesty. Now, when you look at non-citizens, federal government facts account for 22%, more than one-fifth of all federal murder convictions, 18% of fraud, 33% of money laundering, 29% of drug trafficking, and 72% of convictions for drug possession, all paid for by you, the listener, the American taxpayer. This is why I use the term, if you don't put into the kitty, you don't take out of the kitty, and Social Security is a great example. Again, the American people are broke. Everything is propaganda and lies and false flags. When you look at the so-called toddlers that are crossing the border and the kids, first of all, most of these kids are not coming in their family units. 80% of these illegal children enter the U.S. without their parents, and a lot of these so-called kids aren't actually kids. They're actually young adults posing as children. And Trump doesn't want to shut down the border. He just wants to vet the people coming in regarding skill sets and criminal activity. I don't think that's unreasonable when you look at the fact that the poor and the middle class are always the targets of crime. And we need to protect the people. Again, about 93% doesn't have a say. We don't have restitution in the law. We don't have protection in the law. And that's what we're trying to do. So when you look at the fact that more than half of foreign refugees on taxpayer food stamps is quite a catastrophe, a calamity, we need to change things. And this is one of the reasons I talk about QE for the people, and that's where I'm going here. Again, the bottom 93% of income earners. If we do the following, and I'm going to go through it quickly this time, we're going to break up all the big companies, not nationalize them. We just need to break them up into hundreds and thousands of companies, okay? The word oligarchy and monopoly needs to be eliminated. We need to decide how much net worth an individual corporation can have. When we have 8 people who have a higher net worth than half of the globe combined, and everybody else is bought and paid for by the elite, we're funding both sides of wars, NGOs. I mean, China's putting out engineers and we're putting out more lawyers. Come on, what could possibly go wrong? And I'll talk more about this after the break, folks.
Top of the hour breaks coming up. This is USA Prepares. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. And when Rich has completed his discussion on QE, we'll talk a little bit about what's wrong with America. What is wrong with America? You're not going to believe this, please. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of the USA Prepares. Rich Sheben's with us. Rich, you've been talking about quantitative easing for the people, breaking up big companies, and setting the maximum net worth so that just a few people don't own most of the wealth on the planet. Please continue.
Absolutely. And these people who own most of this net worth are buying and paying for basically the people below. And I've talked about the liaisons on this show many times before, the middle management, people who are bought and paid for, like the judges, lawyers, politicians, bankers, etc. So what we need to do is be liberal. So when the Democrats say, oh, we're liberal, they're doing exactly the opposite. And how come they don't comment on me talking about QE for the people, which I've mentioned on national radio many times? Now, you mentioned QE, Vince. A lot of what's happening is artificial inflation through QE, stock buybacks, because we have a deflationary, stagflationary environment right now. And I've talked about this many times. So when you have QE, the first thing that happens is the pressing of buttons and all that so-called quote-unquote money printing goes to the top 1% to 7%. The great majority of that money goes to the top 1% to 2%. This isn't class envy. So when the elite say, oh, well, that's class envy, that's jealousy, that's this, that's that, that's not envy when you just class envy, when you just press buttons and create money out of thin air. And stock buybacks, after 10 years of QE, we've been doing stock buybacks for years. So how does a creation of new debt from the corporations without an expansion of new products or services or people or employees or research and development, how does that benefit the people? Again, that's artificial manufacturing of inflation. So the dividends go to the super wealthy primary preferred shareholders, and the executives cash out on the stock options by increasing the stock. When a stock is purchased, there's less outstanding shares, so the price goes up. That's a simplified version. So the executives in the corporations are cashing in on the stock options. Basically, every program and agenda and rule and law and accountability is to make the wealthy wealthier and keep the status quo. While we have junk bonds making records, margin debt at all-time high, when this goes, it's going to be ugly, to say the least. So going back to the QE for the people, what we could do also is basically have negative interest rates. And when I say negative interest rates, let's do it in a fashion that it benefits the people. Banks still have a huge spread on their cars and their credit card loans when they basically give out loans to the consumer. And there's so much shadow banking and shadow manipulation in this country. I've read that as little as 20% of the banks are making loans because of all these regulations. It's the behind-the-scenes people who are buying and selling loans. When you go to your bank and you say, well, how's my loan doing? A week later, they're probably going to sell your note. So when you look at the mortgage rates, they're roughly more parallel to the 10-year Treasury yield. or what's happening with the 10-year Treasury yield. They said if it's over 3% for any length of time, the whole system's going to crash. While we're teetering on 3%, we'll have a check this morning. We're a little over. So before this crash, this reset, this transition, whatever people call it, we can actually give QE for the people, not in the form of universal basic income, but in the form of all these things I'm saying. Now, if we had negative interest rates, let's say you kept your nose clean. Let's say you paid off your 4 big loans, your mortgages, your car loan, your school loan, your credit card loan, and you did the right thing. You get, let's say if we're in negative 3% interest rate, you get 3% back at the end of the year. I think this would be a huge benefit. And we can't allow the wealthy to make the laws. The people have to speak up. And if we did means testing, we can prioritize that and fine-tune it even more. If we went to 100-year mortgages, at least for a little while, we need to have laws of excess laws. Net worth, high net worth, buying treason. You mentioned sedition earlier in the show, Vince, with Maxine Waters. Espionage. I mean, it looks like all this dossier and the FISA documents are all bought and paid for by the elite. Everything is phony. We can't allow that. We have to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. And then we need to take that mean household debt, whatever it is. I always use the example of 80 grand. I don't know if that's what it is. But if we had that and we gave that to each household and they had to pay off their debt or spend it in the form of vouchers to curb hyperinflation, because GDP doesn't mean happiness, folks. What makes happiness is having no debt or low debt and a high savings account. That's what freedom and liberty is all about, not debt upon debt upon debt upon debt. So if we did this and dismantled the central banks and got rid of a debt-based currency, audited the Fed, and if we audited the Fed, I guarantee you they would eliminate the debt-based currency. If we did that, we could transfer the power back to the people. But see, the people at the very top have an addiction to power, money, and control. And they do not want to see all these politically correct buzzwords like inclusiveness and prosperity and equality and fairness. They don't want that. They say it, but they don't want it. It's a divide and conquer strategy. And that's the only thing that's working because they don't have a plan of action, and that's for the people. This is why they chant and they scream and they hold signs and they yell and they create violence. And they buy mercenaries like Black Lives Matter or Antifa. It's because they can't compete in the arena of ideas and solutions. And there's some Republicans that do that too, and that's why they're called rhinos and neocons. But if the people speak up, if we don't care about being fired or losing our pension and stand for principle, we can actually change this country. But it's up to you, because if the globalists win under the guise of the Democrat Party, I'll tell you right now, you'll be told what to do, what to say, how to think, where to live, how to do it, and basically you're going to be sheeple. You won't be able to think for yourself, and everything's going to be hate speech if you speak up. And you're going to go to jail, just like what's happening in the UK right now. They're calling, if you say something on the Internet, they're calling it hate speech. It's gotten to the point where it's beyond 1984 Orwellian or Twilight Zone episodes. We're living in a category that's all by itself. But if we could speak up and put things in the right context, just like the immigration example I shared with you, and a quote from Hillary Clinton, they're hoping that you don't remember. That's why the powers that be call you and me and us useful idiots. So if we could come out with plans of actions, if we could speak up, we could really make a difference. And because they're trying to eliminate our Bill of Rights and our Constitution for globalism. But it really is all about the wealthy controlling everything and destroying basically rewarding mediocrity to destroy America. And that's what is happening in America. Vince?
I've got a few comments, Rich, but before I comment, Welcome, Mark the Spark in Pennsylvania.
Hello, gentlemen. It must be the wild game that Rich has been eating out there in Montana because, man, you are absolutely brilliant, man. You are right on fire, man. I'm telling you. So keen.
Thank you, sir.
By the way, I'm reading, interesting that there's no coincidences here. I mean, this is, synchronicity going at the maximum speed. I'm reading Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. I encourage people to read it. It will blow your mind. This guy saw into the future. It's about destroying words, destroying our meaning of everything and rearranging everything where people are so overwhelmed. They're mesmerized because they lose the meaning, the references of what things mean. And how can you navigate through life if you lose your core meaning of things, I mean, so anyway, I wanted to call in yesterday, Vincent, and I missed it. And my nephew let me know that it was a really good show with Dr. Shealy. Because this is what I want to bring up to your attention. It's also interesting that Rich was involved in this industry previously, and I know he's against this industry now, and that would be the pharmaceutical industry. What I bring to your attention today, I am a veteran. I come from a long line of veterans. I mentioned that before. What I think could be at potential here is a great reveal. August 23rd, I just learned this a few days ago, August 23rd, the Veterans Appeals Panel said that now veterans can sue the VA in class action. And look, I'm not into suing anybody. I'm not into the legal system and all of that because I think most of it's baloney. But what this holds is the potential for a great reveal of how the Veterans Administration has been wrongfully administering drugs, precisely psychotropic type drugs. The largest healthcare system in the United States is the VA system, the VA healthcare system. And the majority of veterans that go to the VA centers go to for counseling. And who's in charge of those counseling? The mental health clinics? It's not psychologists. That would be too helpful if you ask me. No, it's psychiatry. Psychiatry is in charge of the mental health clinics. And in order to be a part of their process, at least before, and they've changed it a little bit in the last years, you had to be, in order to get counseling, you had to get diagnosed, which means you got a label, and then you had to take their drugs. And if you didn't do that, you weren't going to get counseling. So it's, anyway, these, I guess I'll hold. Sorry.
Mark the Spark, yes, please hold. And you mentioned Fahrenheit 451. That's the temperature at which paper burns. Ray Bradbury. The book is available on eBay right now, $4.11. And you can get the video if you want. So Fahrenheit 451. It's required reading. We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Mark the Spark in Pennsylvania. And class one more time, Fahrenheit 451, which Mark the Spark reminded us about. It was written in 1953, or published in 1953 by Ray Bradbury. So it's 65 years ago. And it's about how firemen are called in by people ratting out their neighbors, saying, I think you can find some books over there. So the firemen show up with the fire engine, and they start fires. They will burn a house down in order to make sure that they destroy all the books. They are in the destruction of knowledge business. They are in the censoring business. And the minions, the firemen, most of them don't realize what they're doing. It's kind of like the police today. How the police are against we the people, we the villagers. They don't realize what they're doing. And the same thing happened in Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 with the firemen. So please consider buying that book and reading it. It's in our library here at the farm. And there's also videos that you can watch of, the movie Fahrenheit 451. Either way, it's required class. Mark, please continue.
Well, what I'd say is acknowledging what Rich said about, why they've got us in all these wars. Smedley Butler, who's from Pennsylvania, Newtown Square, back in the, he was in the Spanish-American War, and he was one of the most decorated Marines of all time. He was an enlisted man. He could have been an officer, but he wanted to be an enlisted man. And he wrote a small booklet and went across country telling people that war is a racket. War is a racket. Now, the current era of people, few have heard of that. But the thing about veterans is that we are aware of the Constitution, and we take an oath to it to protect and defend the people and the Constitution, which is our guidepost for, our culture, our society. So, to hopefully remain free. And, I think that more and more veterans are waking up to the fact that war is a racket and they're just being used. And to find out that, our very Veterans Affairs, medical system is harming veterans. If that isn't the total opposite of supporting veterans, I don't know what it is. Now, that's not to say that in many cases, the VA has supported people, like through the medical procedures and things that they can help the guys. But these drugs, I believe the VA is a front for the drug business, because, we all know that government doesn't usually get the best deal for anything that they purchase because they're using our money to buy all this stuff. So, but it's a handy-dandy setup for the pharmaceutical industry. So who's really running the VA? Who's running the VA? Is it the good people in the government that are running it, or is it the corporations behind? And they're just using those people as front people to sell whatever to, fighting the good fight supposedly and helping us. So here's a time to reveal about, in the largest healthcare system in the United States, to reveal the psychotropic drugs and the danger, the SSRIs and those kinds of drugs, the head drugs, the antidepressants, and those drugs, how they're harming our veterans, and in turn, it could be an opening to reveal how it's harming the rest of our community, the children. The children. They're prescribing these drugs to children. Vincent, did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And Dr. Shealy is absolutely against all of this. Yeah. So
I was hoping to. I caught Dr. Shealy's number for his clinic. I'm going to call him today to see if I can enroll him in the idea, or either directly or maybe he could be of some support in bringing forth a lawsuit for a big reveal. You see, individuals can't. You can sue the VA for medical malpractice, but the thing is, because of, I think it was George Bush Jr. Do you remember that, where he put forth the tort reform?
I'm sorry, I was looking up Norm Shealy's number for you. We'll be back right after this. Okay, a few short commercial announcements. Mark the Spark, you had some more comments?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I've got Norm Shealy's number. For those of you who'd like Dr. Shealy's clinic number in Springfield, Missouri, 417-351-5221, 417-351-5221. That's Central Time here in Missouri. Mark, please continue.
So I would also like to enroll Rich in this idea too, being that he was formerly involved with that. You may know something, Rich, that you haven't shared with me previously. We have talked. But back to the deal, the tort reform. George, if you remember, under George Bush Jr., all the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and the doctors and all that, they got really involved in that tort reform, and what it did was it gives a 2-year limit for any wrong. If something has occurred in your life that was wrong, where they actually did wrong, the medical industry, against you, to you, if it didn't happen in the last 2 years, you're out of luck. No recourse. tell me that isn't by design. I mean, how long does it, some of these, sometimes the effects of some things that happen may take a little longer, or at least for you to put it two and two together. You see, I believed in the doctors at the VA. I thought these guys and gals know what they're doing, and they really care. And and there are some that do, but the system, they have to go along with the system, and the system is designed to slowly kill us. That's my take on it, because, and by the way, the pharmaceutical industry, the psychotropic drugs started in the early 90s with, I believe it was the drug Ritalin that was one of the first. And the first company that put these types of drugs out was Eli Lilly in the early 90s. Who was on the board of Eli Lilly in the early 90s? Anybody have a wild guess? His name is George Herbert Walker Bush. That's Bush Sr., all right? He was on the board of Eli Lilly. And at the same time, the other, Rumsfeld, he was on the board of Cyril. They brought us that great sweetener aspartame, which destroys your brain. And also Cheney was on the board of another company. Can't remember which one it was. It's a big business there. Anyway, and now, and George Bush Sr. was also overseeing, you remember Gulf War I? And when the guys came back and with some, lots and lots of guys were coming up with symptoms. Well, it turns out that they were bombing the Iraqi tanks with shells that had depleted uranium in them, along with the 30 millimeter rounds that were coming out of the Warthog tank planes. And what happens is when those particles went to dust, they were down to the 4 micron size, and the ABC anti-war, anti-chemical suits that the guys were wearing, guys and gals, were only good down to 10 micron. So a lot of guys got exposed. But when these guys came back, I thought, well, Bush, he's our president, and he's a veteran himself. He's a war-decorated hero from World War II. He'll stand up for the guys. He didn't stand up for the guys. So our government doesn't give a damn. There are some good people in there. I'm not taking away from them. But by and large, the system is against us. And it's destroying our lives, through the chemicals, the chemical industry, through the foods, through the medicine, supposed medicine. So, Rich, do you have any input and feedback about what I've just shared about what your understanding is of this whole thing, this whole cabal that's running the medical industry?
Oh, absolutely. And I've made it very clear on the air and in the book, and we've talked privately before too, Mark, that the pharmaceutical industry, a.k.a. Big Pharma, owns the FDA, owns the AMA, owns the medical schools, because it's all about dumbing down the people. It's about, like you said, it's a soft kill, and there's basically no accountability. When I got diagnosed with spinal stenosis and nerve damage, I contacted 30 different attorneys, and they told me, as a white male with as a poor/middle-class white male heterosexual with a Christian name, I have no group self-pity points. So I could not sue. I basically had no restitution. I had no protection under the law. And this is one of the reasons why I avoid hormone steroids, antibiotics when I can, pesticides, GMO foods. I try to eat organic as much as I can. Of course, we go to people's homes for dinner and restaurants here and there, so you can't be 100%. But I understand that things are not as they appear. And you mentioned earlier when you got on the air a moment ago about how the words are being changed and definitions are being changed, basically agreeing with what I said in that context. And what's happening, I think this is so important to be redundant on, is the fact that the mainstream media, all the powers that be, who are bought and paid for, their job is to do professional wordsmithing. is to give subliminal messaging through media propaganda and movies and things like that. Hegelian dialect, or dialectic, it should be called dialect because it's a language in itself. Hegel was a 19th century philosopher. He was basically an imperial con artist, as they called him. And he built his arguments on, early in the argument, on facts, and then he used all these fancy words and terms and tried to manipulate them. But he really, the smarter people found out that he was just pushing an agenda and trying to, again, distract them down or divide the American people by groups. This has been done since before the divide and conquer strategy, since before the Julius Caesars. This is not a new thing. They're just changing the strategies and methodologies. So I think if I had to collate your message here today, Mark, it would be that the American people can no longer afford to hedge their bet. In other words, we need to read up, research up, speak up, and vote up. We're at a time in history that if the globalists win, again under the guise of the Democrat Party, you'll be told what to do, what to say, how to think, how to live, where to live, everything, and what to eat. And you'll be told it's good for you. And you'll be told you're fighting for freedom and liberty when you're fighting for the pockets of the bankers and the hierarchy of the military-industrial complex. I think right now, folks, is a time that we need to not hedge our bets as Americans. We need to speak up. And if you get fired, if you lose your pension, like I did, we need to stand for principle, and that's why I went over the 3 criteria of standing for principle, as I try to remember to do every show that I'm on, because we're at D-Day right now. This is the time when the American people have to remember the loss of life, the millions of combat soldiers who gave up their life at a very young age for the freedoms and liberties and so-called justices, which we don't have a rule of law anymore. It's a rule of group. If we can stand up for the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and actually take a stand for principle, I think we would all be better off in the long run.
I agree with that. One thing more, Vincent, I'd like to leave you with, because you talked yesterday with Dr. Shealy about, reorganizing in like groups of, like an intentional community, intentional village, right? What you were talking about.
Yeah.
There was a people, I don't know, maybe you've heard of them. They're in the northern region of Spain. They're called the Basque. And during the time of Franco, which was a dictator, and he was a ruthless dictator in Spain, the Basque people wanted to retain their identity. They were a unique culture in and of themselves, but Spain wanted to totally dominate them at the hands of Franco. So what they did was there was a priest that came up with the idea of organizing instead of fighting the fight directly, because they had tried to retain their independent their culture. This priest had the idea that if they reorganized in a way where they could self-support themselves, they might have something. Well, it's called the Mondragon model, Mondragon. I don't know if you'd ever heard that, Vincent.
No, I haven't, but I wrote it down so I can look it up.
Yeah, it's very interesting because what they did was they started creating employee-owned cooperatives where everybody had a vested interest in whatever idea they were gathered around, organized around, and it could be inspired to make things and produce things. And then so they fought their battle economically to retain their identity and their culture as best they could. And I believe the model worked very well and has worked very well. Here's something interesting to note. When you study it, as I've studied it, after they've been around for, some time, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe 10 years or thereabouts. I don't know how long it took them to figure this out. But they figured out that because they would organize like a corporation, and gather so many people together to make their widgets, this widget or that widget or provide services, and then they would start to support each other in, these different businesses. But what they figured out that whenever a group got beyond 300 people, it would become political and it would be self-destructive. Now, I find that fascinating. So groups of people are good up to a point. I've sensed that myself. When they get too big, it's just like they become a monstrosity, they become political, and then they become, self-destructive. So anyway, it's an interesting idea that might inspire some new ideas of organizing. And also I want to mention, I have checked up the Nementhal the Nemhall. Yeah. But I'm trying to get my head around it, and it's a little bit challenging. But anyway, I'll let you go with that. Thank you guys very much, and thank you, Rich, for being so keen.
Mark, can you hold through this break? I have a comment about the Mondragon model.
Okay.
And you might find this story interesting. We'll be right back. Mark, you mentioned a term that I hadn't heard of before, Mondragon's model, Mondragon '(S) model. And tell me if this is an example of it. I had not heard of that before. You mentioned it just a few minutes ago. So back in the 1990s, I lived in a small village in Virginia, and there was a factory in the village, and that factory was manufacturing textile products. Shaw Carpets was the company. They pulled out. And when they pulled out, everybody got fired. I guess the term is laid off. But they all lost their jobs. And they had this building, and it just sat there. So I approached the town, and I said, well, a lot of people got laid off. They've got no place to go. There are no jobs. There's no industry left. How about this? How about if I give half of my computer manufacturing company to those people? I'll give it to them. They have to stay there. They have to earn it, but they'll get it. I'll keep 51% of the business because they really don't know what they're doing. But I'll train every single one of them. I'll train them in marketing. I'll train them in manufacturing, quality control, computer service. I'll train them to be computer technicians. I will train every single one of them. They'll continue to collect unemployment while they're being trained. And the minute their unemployment ends, they will be productive in this business that is owned and operated by the villagers. The town laughed at me and told me to take a hike. And instead they wanted to convert that building to a private prison. But that was what I wanted to do. Is that an example of Mondragon's model?
I think it is. I think you'll find it fascinating if you research it, Vincent. That I think it's very workable. Because here's the thing, and I grew up in a family-owned business, restaurant business here in Springfield. The thing is ownership. If people don't own something, it's like people that rent property. If you rent, most renters don't take care of the property because they have no vested interest in taking care of it, because they don't own it, so who cares, right? But if you give people a chance at vested interest, and most of the model out there is employee owner relationship, and they rarely have a chance of being involved in the actual. They're not really their heart's not in it because they're just in it for the money. Everybody. I mean, it comes down to it. The employees, they have to earn money to survive, but. So I don't know. I don't know. I think it's your idea of what you was trying to do. It's similar to the Mondragon model, but I think it could be workable. They also cap the managers of these corporations, these cooperatives they call it, I guess. They cap how many times more they can make than the common worker. Now we have CEOs making over 300 times the common worker. That's some would say, well, it's free, it's free market, and it's an opportunity, and It's just, that's the way it is, the best rise to the top. Really? CEOs are the best we got? Some of them might be, but a lot of them are, I don't know. I think they're still.
Mark, I may be incorrect in this, but I don't think so. I have seen multiples of over 1,000 times more than the little people.
Wow.
In companies. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think the average is like 300 something. Yeah.
Yeah. So the little people, who do all the work, the little people who interface with the customers, the little people who stock the shelves, you might see 1,000 times that earning be paid in compensation, total compensation to the CEO.
Exactly.
It's out of control. Out of control. And you know what? These CEOs put their pants on the same way we do.
That's right.
Mark, I really appreciate you calling in. It's always great to hear from you. You always have so much insight, inspiration, and I know why they call you Mark the Spark. Thanks so much. But Shealy, thank you for being with us. It's always good to be with you on the air. You've got a lot of wisdom, and thank you for sharing it with our class as well. And of course, we'll chat off the air. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.